It is 1944, the fifth year of the war in Europe. The skies above Hungary tremble as a fleet of Allied bombers crosses into the airspace. They sight set on Budapest and the factories surrounding the capital. From nearby airfields, a handful of Hungarian fighters marked with a white cross scramble to intercept. They are outnumbered and outgunned. And yet, day after day, these Hungarian pilots rise to meet the near certain death. But in the face of overwhelming odds, Hungary unveils a secret weapon, a technological ghost, a homegrown innovation designed not just to level the playing field but to haunt it. This is the 44M Lidérc, a Hungarian-built air-to-air rocket that listens for the sound of enemy engines, slips past friendly fighters and strikes like a phantom from the shadows. In the final desperate years of World War II, smaller Axis powers like Hungary were forced to innovate out of necessity. Hungary, facing mounting pressure on its home front, embarked on a series of ambitious military projects with limited resources. One of these projects was a weapon that was promising but never fully realized its potential, the 44M Lidérc rocket. The name Lidérc is a Hungarian word for something like phantom or a ghost. The Lidérc is a unique supernatural being of a Hungarian folklore. It is a name that perfectly suits this weapon, as finding any information about this rocket was literally like chasing a ghost. Up until 2008 we knew very little about this rocket, but that year some fragments of a ruptured rocket were discovered and they finally gave us a clue how it looked and worked, and this helped us to understand this weapon better. The development of the 44M Lidérc must be understood within the broader context of Hungary's military and industrial situation in the mid-1940s. At the time of World War II, the nation was heavily reliant on Germany for equipment, but as the war progressed, Germany's own logistical needs mounted and Hungary was forced to develop its own homegrown weapons. The Lidérc was a part of wider national effort to create effective, mass-producible weapons for homeland defense. A parallel project, also from 1944, was the 44M Lidérc, an unguided anti-tank rocket. With the homeland under threat from both Allied bombers and the advancing Soviet army, Hungary's military leadership prioritized the development of powerful, short-range rocket systems that could provide defensive advantage instead of attempting to manufacture tanks or aircrafts that were already outdated compared to their German and Soviet counterparts. This pragmatic approach demonstrates that the Hungarian leadership had the right idea about their geopolitical and industrial realities. The true marvel of the 44M Lidérc was not its rocket body, which was a standard solid fuel design, but its brain. A revolutionary acoustic proximity fuse invented by Károly Pulvary of the Technological University of Budapest. Highly advanced piece of technology for 1944. Far more sophisticated than the simple contact fuses or time delays used on most contemporary rockets. The sensor was composed of a super sensitive microphone and a specialized squelch principal circuit with 2 electron tube amplifiers. The system was designed to listen for the distinct sound of an enemy bomber's engine and trigger the rocket's warhead when it came within range. The fuse was tested in a wind tunnel using an artificial sound of an American bomber engine and was shown to work perfectly in this controlled environment. This meant that the fired rocket did not pose threat to their own aircrafts but only to the enemies. And this was huge. The level of sophistication in the Lidérc fuse stands in stark contrast to the simplicity of its unguided rocket motor. This highlights a paradox of late war military technology. While Hungary could produce a genius cutting-edge brain for its weapon, its industrial capacity was too limited to create a truly advanced delivery system. The Lidérc design show how a smaller nation could pour its intellectual capital into a single highly innovative component, but its overall output was still constrained by the inability to mass produce a more complex and robust platform. The fact that Germany, the leading nation in rockets research at the time, expressed significant interest and even received a sample of the acoustic fuse for evaluation speaks volumes about the technical merit of the Hungarian design. The Lidérc's fuse was a groundbreaking innovation, and if it had been completed, it could have changed the nature of air-to-air combat. The 44M Lidérc was intended to be launched from a Messerschmitt Me-210 CA-1 heavy fighter aircraft. The plan was for a single Me-210 to launch a salvo of 2 or 4 Lidérc rockets into a bomber group. The strategic goal was not necessarily to destroy every single aircraft. Instead, the primary objective was to scatter bomber formations and disrupt the attacks. This particular strategic philosophy reveals the understanding of late war aerial combat. Bomber formations relied on tight, coordinated flight patterns to provide mutual defensive fire from the machine guns, making them a difficult target for a single fighter. A weapon with an acoustic proximity fuse, however, could create a zone of chaos and explosions within the formation. This would force the bombers to break their defensive cohesion, making them far more vulnerable to attacks from fighters. Furthermore, the design reflected a pragmatic and defensive mindset. By focusing on disrupting formations and impacting crew morale, the Lidérc's true aim was protecting civilians from terror bombings without having to score a one-on-one kill on every enemy aircraft. So the Lidérc was not a precision strike weapon, but more of an aerial denial weapon designed to make the enemy's mission harder and riskier rather than guarantee destruction. This contrasts with other contemporary rockets like the German R4M Orkan, which had a powerful warhead intended to secure a kill with a single hit. The ambitious air-to-air program for the Lidérc was ultimately doomed by circumstance. The complex electronic fuses, which were the heart of the weapon, were produced at the Weiss-Manfred works in Chapel. In the final months of the war, this key industrial hub became a primary target for Allied bombing raids, which eventually made it impossible to complete the sophisticated acoustic systems. However, the story of Lidérc did not end here. With the rockets themselves produced in significant numbers, but without their fuses, the Hungarian military had to improvise. As the Soviet forces advanced into the country, the unfused Lidérc rockets were repurposed for a crude but desperate new role: ground-based rocket artillery. Lacking the acoustic fuse, they were likely fitted with a simple impact or timed warheads and used to bombard Soviet infantry. These rockets saw service in the defensive operations around Chapel, Erd and Lake Velence, where they were fired against Soviet troops. This marked the Lidérc's brief and final appearance on the battlefield, not as a stealthy ghost in the sky, but as a rudimentary barrage weapon fired in the last-ditch effort to hold back the tide of the collapsing front. At the end of the day, the 44M Lidérc wasn't a design failure, it was just unlucky. The concept was genuinely ahead of its time, and if it had made it to full production, it could have had a major impact. But by 1944, things were already too far gone.